Lord, that we are focused on you and that we may use that to change this world. Amen.
All right, kiddos, head for the gym. Yeah, we're going. Sarah, you going? Which way are you taking them? That way? You want that way? Head for an exit door. Just go. Just go. All right. We're going to pick back up in our 10 Commandments series. So if you want to go to Exodus 20, you can catch up with me there. There's like darkness over here. Is that normal? Oh, it's those two. Wow, we got two lights out. Those are the fun ones. You get the lift and the ladder to get that one. But it's just dark right here, so I don't know why it just hit me real quick. That's why I have a youth minister, so I can say, get up there on that lift thing. All right, Exodus 20. We are going to go through this. It's the second command's a very interesting one. It's a very abstract one to us. For them, the original audience, it would have been a very practical thing. It would have been very easily understood. For us, it becomes a little more difficult. Application can be really interesting on this as well. So we're going to kind of jump into this thing and hopefully end on a very practical and a very useful application at the end of this thing. I do want to review real quick. We need to understand that the progression and how we get to this moment in time where the children of Israel, all right, and y'all are cool, the children of Israel, the children of Jacob, all right, who was renamed Israel, okay, and they're standing at the foot of Mount Sinai, and God begins to literally speak out loud, all right, and it's just an amazing time. So how do we get there? We start with the calling of Abraham. Abraham is called out of the land of Ur and says, go over here to a land you don't know about and leave all your family behind. Just go on your own. How'd he do on that? Not well. He brought uncle or cousin Lot, which, any headaches come along with Lot? Yeah, anybody been there where God told you to do something and you said, well, I'll do all this, but I want to bring this with me. And God goes, I didn't tell you to bring him with you, and now we're going to have a little trouble, all right? So you can read that on your own. But Abraham goes. He's very obedient. He's always obedient when God tells him exactly what to do, but when God leaves him on his own, what happens? Train wreck every single time. And some of you are like that. You're like, God, just write it on my forehead, all right? And I'll be good, all right? So he goes to the land of Canaan, and God gives him this amazing promise. He says, I'm going to give you all of this land. I'm going to give you offspring like you wouldn't believe, all right? Which is a very interesting thing when it's spoken to probably an 80, 85-year-old man with no children. You're going to have all these kids, all these grandkids. It's going to be an amazing thing. He says, here's the promise. So the promise is land and offspring. Here's the sign. For 400 years, you're going to be a stranger in this land. You're not going to have any property. You're not going to have any possession. You're not going to be able to claim this land as your own. And then you're going to be enslaved and oppressed. But I'm going to come in and I'm going to judge the nation that enslaves you. And then you're going to plunder that land. And you're going to come back to this land where I've called you in the fourth generation. All right? And he gives this promise. Anytime you see the word promise, especially in the New Testament when Paul is talking, especially with Galatians, he talks about the promise, the promise. Abraham was given the promise. This is the promise you need to come back to. All right? This land and offspring, and here are the signs that go along with that. Now, Abraham has a son that's going to carry on the line. He also has an extra son, but he has a son that's going to carry on the line, whose name is what? Okay, this is the new, not the new normal, just the new. What is going to be is y'all participating, all right? And you talking. And if you have a question, do the international sign of I have a question, okay? And feel free to stop me. I do not want to do monologues for the rest of my life, okay? I'm tired of doing monologues, all right? Raise your hand. If you got a question, feel free to stop me. It's okay to do that in church from now on, okay? Everybody cool with that? No more normal, all right? So y'all ask questions. So what's his name? What's the one that's going to carry on the promise? Isaac, all right? Good. And God appears to Isaac and says, I'm going to give you this land, and you're going to have offspring. And then Isaac has twins, bless his soul, all right? Twin boys at that, all right? Now, luckily for him, they were fraternal and not identical, all right? So one's nasty, hairy, and the other is not so much nasty and hairy, okay? And one's going to carry on the promises, and his name is Jacob, and God changes his name to, which is why we call them the children of Israel, okay? Or the Israelites, all right? It literally means to struggle with God. That's what this means. Isra and El, to struggle with God. And God gives him the same promise. So anytime God wants to identify himself later on in the Old Testament, he says what? I am the God of the ones to whom I gave the promise, the ones to whom I spoke to, right? And then God goes silent for probably about 150 years. And the children of Israel who have moved to Egypt are taken and enslaved by a new king. This is when you start reading in Exodus 1, a new king shows up that did not know who Joseph was. Now you remember, Joseph, what was his position in Egypt? Eventually he became number 2. So it's not like a new president came in and all the other systems in place. We believe that a whole new dynasty came in, that there was some type of invasion, some type of, I don't want to say a coup, but it was an overthrow. So a new king, a new dynasty comes into play who's going, I don't even know who this Joseph guy is. And I don't know who his dad was, and I sure don't know who the children of his dad were. And they're trouble, and they can cause trouble. This is the beginning of Exodus. And so at about 80 years before the Exodus, this king, I believe, begins to enslave them. All right? You can read that there in Exodus. Okay? And so God has been silent until 80 years later, and he shows up in a bush on fire. And he sends Moses back, and he says, all right, I want you to bring my people out, and I'm going to mess them up like I told you I was going to mess them up when I said I would judge them. And I told you would plunder them. And we go through all the plagues, and we get the Exodus, and God leads them out of the land of Egypt, and he leads them up to this mountain, this Mount Sinai. I like this picture, but it looks nothing like that. Sinai looks more like a plateau. It's a bigger mountain. It's more like a plateau. Now imagine this mountain, but imagine it in a cloud of smoke and cloud, and inside the smoke and the cloud, you have fire and lightning and thunder rumblings and horns blowing from somewhere, we don't know where, all right? And then this God begins to speak. Now these people, they've been through the whole Exodus, right? Imagine being enslaved for 80 years, and then all of a sudden some guy shows up, and the Nile turns to blood. Frogs start going everywhere. You get flies one day. You get gnats the next day. You got livestock, cow tipping with no one tipping, all right? They just tip, all right, and they die. You get hail with lightning inside of it, or fire inside. Figure that one out, all right? Boils start appearing on people. Locusts show up and eat everything that didn't get killed. All of a sudden, the lights go out, and I mean out, a darkness you could feel for 3 days. And then the firstborn of the Egyptians, your oppressors, die. And yours is saved because you took a lamb and painted blood on the door. This has been an interesting 3 months in all of our lives. Amen? Imagine their life. Imagine what it's been like for them, because they don't know anything about this God. But he just shows up in this guy named Moses, and all of a sudden this crazy stuff happens. They walk out of the wilderness. They go through all of these different trials. They walk through the Red Sea, and they show up at this mountain, and God starts speaking. And what does he say to them? Look in 20. It says, then God spoke all these words. And you might want to write in your Bible, out loud to the Israelites, just to get the full effect. It's not like he whispered it to Moses, all right? He spoke out loud to the Israelites, and he said this, and this is the beautiful claim. If you skip over verse 2, you completely miss the point of the gospel. He says, I am the Lord your God. That means I am Yahweh, your Elohim, all right? Yahweh is the name of God. I always compare it to Bob the builder. If you have kids, all right, you remember this well. He was Bob, and he was a builder. This is Yahweh, and he's a God, all right? So I am Yahweh, your God. I am the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Does it say I am the God who will bring you out if you follow these 10 commandments? Does it say I will bring you out of slavery if you do what I tell you to do? and you're going to get a grade on this whether or not you do what I told you to do. No. Did Jesus show up and go, all right, I'm waiting to see if Connor's really going to behave? Like Avery back there, I'm just not sure if I'm going to go through with this whole crucifixion cross thing. I'm just going to wait and see what happens. No. But too many of us live like that. We live in that legalism. Here's the thing. I'm the one who's already brought you out of Egypt. Now do what I expect. I'm the one who already died for you on the cross. Now love everybody you come in contact with. See how simple this is? It's not love everybody and I'll see if that'll work out. And Christianity recognizes that. Religion doesn't. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Do not have other gods besides me, before me. Literally, it means in my face, in my presence, in panim. Panim is the Hebrew word for face. Don't bring them into this. I'm your God. I'm the one who's done all this. I'm the one who's making this whole mountain top set on fire. I'm the one blowing the trumpets. I'm the one doing all this stuff. And they go, no argument here. You are our God. We are not going to worship the gods that we left behind in Egypt. You are our God. We don't know you that well, but we're with you. I believe Peter comes along and puts us in the perspective of Christ because we don't struggle with having other gods. All right? Everybody okay with that? We don't have, no one's looking at their car and going, oh, I believe this car is the creator of heaven and earth, and I will bow down to it. No, you may give it worship. You may give it worth. You think it has great worth in your life, to which I argue with my children all the time. Do not worship your car. 10 years from now, it's not going to be worth anything. Worship your house. If you're going to worship something, be smart, all right? Be good with your money, all right? But these are not things you worship. God is the one you recognize as the deity, as the sovereign God of all things, and he's proven himself over the last couple of months with these guys. So he says, do not have other gods. Don't go, I want to bring along Ra and Isra and all these other gods that you could pull in from Egypt. And they went, we're in. And then he says the second commandment. Pick up reading with me here in 4. Can you throw that up, Austin? Y'all got that? Verse 4 says this, do not make an idol for yourself, whether in the shape of anything in the heavens above or on the earth below or in the waters under the earth. You must not bow down to them or worship them. What's the them here? Come on, again, participation time. All right. Idols. These are the idols. Do not make an idol. All right. And do not worship them and do not bow down to them. That word, let me keep going with it, and I'll come back and double that. Here's why. Here's why you are not to worship or bow down to them. For I, the Lord your God, what's he already said about, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, and I am the Lord your God who will be jealous. I am a jealous God if you make and bow down these idols. And I will be punishing the children for their father's sins to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing faithful love, hesed. Y'all remember this word when we did the Psalms? This is a love that you could not possibly ever imagine being able to receive. Would never be given. But this God who loves you gives it to you anyway. But showing faithful love to 1,000 generations. 3-4 versus 1,000. You see where we're going with this? 3-4 to those who hate me, 1,000 to those who love and keep my commands. But showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. All right, now here's the question. Was this a redundant command? He already gave the first command of what? What's the first command? No other gods before me. All right, always do it. One God, no other gods before me. And then he says, you are not to make idols or bow down to them. I do this, but everybody put up 2 fingers because it's the second command, all right? And then bend them a little bit, and then kneel down. See, y'all are going to learn these like I learned them in Vacation Bible School. All right, so number 1 is you will have how many gods? 1 God. Number 2, you not make or bow down to your idols. all right? I'm telling you, it's going to click eventually, all right? Now, is that a redundant thing? No. We, in our understanding and our reading of this, we may drift into the thinking, that sounds redundant. To them, no, not at all. Because how often did they make idols? They made idols. Did they sit there and worship these little pieces of gold or stone or wood? They didn't worship these as God. They worshiped them as symbols of God, representative of this being, this higher being. All right? And so God says, I'm going to be your God, but here's the rule. The Egyptians, they make idols. They make physical representations of their gods. You are not to do that with me. You are not to try and make something that symbolizes me. I'm just going to stand on my own. Because the more we try to symbolize God, what happens? How many of you can accurately, completely capture the essence of God? With stone or wood. How many of you are that good? No, we'll fall way short. Now, here's what I want you to understand. The word idol comes from the Greek word eido, which means it's a verb to see or to perceive with your eyes. So when we make an idol, what do we make it of? Something we what? We see with our eyes. In Romans 1, Paul says this almost exact same thing as the second command. That these people, they make idols out of things they see, and they've darkened themselves to the truth. They are holding down the truth, and they're making idols out of all things. And again, same idea. You don't want to try and make a physical representation of God because it's going to distract you. What does he say? Why do we not do this? Because I'm a jealous God. Now, Oprah got messed up by this because she thought God was jealous of her. She didn't recognize that God was jealous for her. Do I need to say that again? She thought God was jealous of her when God was jealous for her. I've said this before. It's like when your dog runs away and he's down the street and you're really worried about him. You're not jealous that that dog's going to find some other person that they like better than you. And you sit there and you're self-pitying, oh, I wish he would come back to me. All right? No, your dog's running, especially in my neighborhood. My dog tends to get eaten when he leaves our neighborhood or my yard. All right? It's happened twice. All right? And so when Lincoln gets out of our yard and Cord will hear him barking like any distance, it's like running down the stairs, get Lincoln, we got to go get him, because we're jealous for his safety, for his benefit. And God says, I'm jealous if you start chasing after these idols that tend to represent me and that are not me. I would explain it like this. If you take a mirror is what? How do you make a mirror? You have glass and you paint some type of silver backing on it, right? Everybody okay with that? Some of you are going, wow, I never knew that. Read a book, all right? Watch a video, all right? It's probably on YouTube, all right? But it's just a pane of glass, but it has silver backing on it. And what happens? Your vision stops at the silver. Now, if you take just a pane of glass, how many of you ever looked out the window and went, wow, this is an amazing piece of glass? This is such a cool piece of glass. No, you look out a window and what do you see? You see beyond the pane of glass. And God knows this about us. When we make idols, when we put up idols and we say, oh, because it represents, eventually it's always going to turn into a mirror. Eventually, whatever it is will always turn into a mirror. I want to show you something because I want you to understand the whole jealous thing. Now, Ash and I we bought our plane tickets to Cancun for October. You know why? Because it was cheap and I'm not scared and I love the beach, okay? So here's the thing. I can take an idol of my wife. Isn't she beautiful? Isn't this amazing? What is that? Oh, there's something. I mean, this is like a photograph, right? This is not just some picture somebody drew. This is like a really cool picture, all right? Yes, it's at A&M, Connor, if you were wondering. Where is that, Ashley? Where's that? Because you don't get more romantic than the registration building at Texas A&M, right? So let's say this. We go on our trip in October to Cancun, all right? We go back because we want to spend some time together. And I take this with me. I take my picture. I take the picture that I have of my wife, and I take it with me. And I put it in the seat next to me, or I just hold on to it on the plane flight. Yeah. You still look beautiful. All right? So and I'm just walking around with this all the time. And I go down to the beach, and I got my picture with me. I lay down in bed, and I go, okay, good night. All right? How stupid would that be when I have her right there beside me? But what happens? I want to make an idol that'll represent, and I lose track of the actual person. And God says, I am jealous. Imagine Ashley sitting on the plane. Far be it from her to be that embarrassed by me at any point, but imagine her husband is on the plane holding on to a picture of his wife, and she's going, I don't know. He's been doing this for years because he stopped seeing me and he started seeing this picture. He started worshiping the picture. And he lost sight of me sitting right here. And he doesn't talk to me anymore. He talks to the picture. Are we any different when we start making idols and we stop experiencing God in his fullness? And what does God experience? Jealousy. God says, I'm jealous for their best. I'm jealous because them walking around with an idol is not what's best. See, the problem is, that's a pretty good picture, right? Our photographer did a good job, even though he was horrible at everything else, but that's a whole other story. But you know what? Like I said, what if you were to go, if I were to give you some Play-Doh and go, make an idol of the God you serve and the God you worship, and you took this Play-Doh and you did the best you could, most of you would come out with an idol that looks more like this. Happy Mother's Day, 2010, Love Court. And see, here's the problem. This is a beautiful picture. It's a photo. But what are you going to create? Are you going to create anything that looks, does this look anything like this woman? You were 7. I get it. But so are we. What's our conception of God? What's our ability to create something that in any way looks like our God? And so God says this, you will have no other gods before me. And don't even try to make a physical manifestation because it's going to turn out looking as cute as can be, but it'll turn out looking like this compared to my greatness and my bigness and the conception you can possibly have of me. And so when you try to encapsulate and capture God, always it's going to fall short of what God truly is. And what's sad is, some of us in this room have gone to this and gone, this is as good as God is. And because this is my conception of God, I don't know that he can get any better than this. You're like a 7-year-old drawing a picture with crayons. Go over to Exodus 32. In Exodus 32, Moses has gone up onto Mount Sinai to receive the full law. And he's going to be up there for 40 days and 40 nights. Joshua is like halfway standing guard. And he's up there talking, Moses is up there talking with God, and all of a sudden God goes, we got a problem down in the camp. You may need to address this. It says, verse 32, verse 1. When the people saw that Moses was delayed in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said to him, come make a God who will go before us, because this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." All right? Now, when they said make a God for us, I think the clear indication of this is not come up with a new God who is the sovereign creator of the heavens and the earth and all these things. He's literally saying make something physical here. Then Aaron replied to them, "Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives and your sons and your daughters and bring them to me." So all the people took off the gold rings that were on their ears and brought them to Aaron. He took the gold from their hands and fashioned it with an engraving tool and made it into an image of a calf. Then they said, "Israel, this is your God who brought you up from the land of Egypt." Now that should sound familiar, doesn't it? Are they saying we're inventing a new God? No, we had this God who brought us out under the leadership of this guy who seems to have a communication, seems to be able to talk with this God named Moses. And now he's gone, he's out of the picture, and now we have no way to relate to this God. So what do? Aaron, come make us a physical manifestation so that we can worship God through this. Do you see the substitution nature of this? They're not saying, they didn't go, "We don't know what happened to Moses, but isn't our God awesome? We're just going to sit here and worship him in spirit and truth. We're just going to sit in this moment." No, they said, give us something physical. You know why? Because we are people who are so anti-faith. We want to have something we can hold on to. We want to have something we can grab, something that we can physically represent, because our faith is so lacking. And this is why God is so worshiped when we are faithful, when we do have faith, because God looks at us in these moments where we just go, "I don't need a picture of this. I don't need a calf. I don't need a dog. I don't need a son. I just need to sit in the presence of God." And God's going, "That's the one I'm going to sit with." But we are so resistant to that. That's what they did here. And they didn't say, "We don't know what happened to God." We said, "This is the physical representation of the God who brought us out of Egypt." They knew something supernatural brought them out. They just wanted to put a physical picture on it. And look how God responds to it. Verse 5, just keep going to the text. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it and then made an announcement. There will be a festival to the Lord, to Yahweh. Remember, he's still calling him God. At no point does God ever come down and go, "You have violated the first commandment." At no point on the whole golden calf thing does he ever say, "You have violated the first command." You violated the second. Early the next morning, they arose, offered burnt offerings, and presented fellowship offerings. The people sat down to eat and drink, then got up to play. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Go down at once, for your people you brought." I like it when God flips it here. I didn't have nothing to do with this. All right, it's like when I tell Ashley, "Your child did something," okay? "Go down at once, for your people you brought up from the land of Egypt have acted corruptly. They have quickly turned from the way I commanded them. They have made for themselves an image of a calf. They have bowed down to it, sacrificed to it, and said, 'Israel, this is your God who brought you up from the land of Egypt.' Then the Lord said to Moses, 'I have seen this people. They are indeed a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone, Moses, so that my anger can burn against them and I can destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation.'" God's a little bit upset. You know why? Was he being replaced by another God? No. He was being replaced by a physical picture. That some people, I don't know if they were acting in good faith or not, some people thought, if we have a physical representation, now we can move forward and we can worship this God. And God goes, "You can't do that right. You cannot do that adequately." So the question is, how are we supposed to worship? How are they supposed to worship? Just sit there in the middle of the wilderness and look up at the skies and look up at everything around them and look at the people around them and see God in all these things? Yeah. Today's one of those days, I wish we had a retractable roof, all right? where you just pull the thing back, or that we could get out of the building. You don't think the building could turn into an idol, do you? Austin and I are here during the middle of the week. This place is not real holy during the middle of the week. All right? There's spiders crawling around a lot of places. All right. What else have we turned into idols? Or what is it? What are the things that can so easily turn into idols that started off really well? I have a friend that refers to this as Bibleolatry. It's a desire to know the Bible, but not give a rip about the God who wrote it. I don't want to be a seminary professor. I would love to teach in college someday. I just love college students and want to take those kids that come out of good youth groups and be a bridge to get them into adulthood. That's what I would want to do. You couldn't. There's not enough money to make me a seminary professor, because what I saw there was a lot of Bibleolatry. A lot of people walking around with crosses on chains around their neck. How often does this replace it? And again, I'm not saying these are bad. I'm just saying these are panes of glass that, if we're not careful, can get painted over in the back and start to reflect ourselves. So how are we supposed to worship? Come over here to John 4. I saw this quote. Let me read it while you're coming over here to this. Do not limit your experience of God by capturing his essence in an idol. Experience God in his fullness, even in bits and pieces, not in woefully inadequate representations. I like that. Here's a book. You got to be a nerd to read this thing, all right? It's G.K. Chesterton, Orthodoxy. The second chapter is called The Maniac. He says the maniac is the one who goes insane. He said it's not the poet that goes insane. It's the mathematician. It's the accountant who goes insane. Because the poet looks up at God and looks at all of creation, looks at all the things that God has done, and God, this is amazing right here. Let me just hang out with this for a little bit. And tomorrow he goes, look at that. Look at that river. Look at that valley. Look at that mountain. Look at that sky. Look at that beach. Oh my gosh, I'm not leaving here. I'm just going to stay here, because everyone that loves Jesus should love the beach, right? Thank you. But what happens when we try and get our head around God? Anybody been to the Sistine Chapel? 1, 2, 3? Okay, a couple of you guys, all right? Meredith, can you kind of summarize it for me? No? Why not? It's too much? Angie? Can you summarize it? Cool. All right? That's like a teenager. It was cool, whatever. All right? That's why you don't take kids to Europe. All right? You can't get your head around the Sistine Chapel. And we do the same thing with God. And that's what happens. And this is what we talk about it as. Again, sorry, Court, but this is what we come up with when we try to encapsulate God, and when we don't just sit in the Sistine Chapel and go, all right, I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes just focusing on that little section right there. Wow. All right, I'm coming over here now. Do you see the difference? Idols are when we try and take the Sistine Chapel and make it into a little bitty action figure. John 4. Y'all know the story. This is Jesus. He's in Samaria. He's there with the woman at the well. And he's talking with her. And they're having this very interesting conversation. And just as a advertisement, if you are not watching The Chosen, or if you have not watched the first season of The Chosen, you need to go on your phone, go to The Chosen, get The Chosen app on your phone or whatever. They're hoping to be 6 or 7 seasons. It's the story of Jesus. All right, and they go through it. It's just so good, all right? And I don't say that very often. You know that, all right? If it's done and it's done really well, I'm going to sell you on it. Go watch The Chosen. All right, there's 8 episodes of the first season. The last episode is the episode of the woman at the well, and it's just so cool. It's just good. The Chosen, just look it up, whatever phone thing you got, all right? So Jesus is having this conversation with her. She's just at the well, and it rolls around. He says, go get your husband, and I'll tell you more. And she goes, I don't have a husband. Now he goes, I know you've had 5, and the man you're living with now is not your husband. And she says, and I'm going to pick up here in verse 19. 4:19 says, Sir, the woman replied, I see that you are a prophet. In other words, you shouldn't be able to know that, but you do, so God's like speaking to you, and you're speaking for God, so that makes you a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, yet you Jews say the place to worship is in Jerusalem. Do you see the idols that have come into play? This mountain versus what? Jerusalem. This is our idol. This is your idol. Did the temple become an idol for the people of Israel? Stephen claims it, and they stoned him to death. Look at the earmarks. Did the people look at the idol, and was it a pane of glass, or did it become a mirror? Did it cease to become that conduit to God? Our father worship on this mountain, yet you Jews say the place to worship is in Jerusalem. Jesus told her, believe me, woman, an hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. We're doing away with the idols. The idols are nothing. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know because salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming and is now here. And if the hour was coming and is now here in the year 33 AD, we are living in that hour. All right? But an hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. What's the opposite of spirit? If something is spirit, pneumatikos, all right? It's the word for wind. Anybody ever seen the wind? Can you go grab the wind? Is there anything material about the wind? All right, this is where this word comes from. So there's spirit and there's material. All right? There's Ashley and there's Ashley's picture. All right? There's spirit and there's truth. And so Jesus is saying, you're no longer going to worship on this mountain or that mountain, in this building or that building, with that book or this book, with this translation or this translation, with these trinkets or with these trinkets. You're going to worship in spirit, like the wind. It has all the material nature of the wind in this thing. You will worship in spirit and truth. Yes, the Father wants such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. I think Jesus does one of these things. I'm he. Do you realize the very first time Jesus told anyone that he was the Messiah was to a 5-time married Samaritan woman? That's the first time Christ says, I'm the Messiah. And he says, and I just told you how to worship. You don't worship on this mountain, that mountain. You don't worship with all these representations of me. You just sit in the presence of God. And you don't try and conjure up anything. You don't try and get your head around anything. You just look at this and go, wow. How many of you worship in wonder? How many of you pray for God to give you wonder? A lot of you pray for God to give you money and give you health and give you stuff. How many of you have prayed, God, give me wonder? Let me be amazed at all that you are, at all of your presence. You see, the beautiful thing is when we tap into a prayer that God wants to answer, he just unloads on us. So are you praying, God, help me not to need those idols? Help me not to need those physical representations. Help me not to find things that I can conjure up, that I can sort of not have to stretch my faith. God, give me wonder so I can see you in all these things. For me, one of the most worshipful verses in all the Bible is Mark 1:35. Jesus has been healing all day the night before, heals Peter's mother-in-law. Whole town comes out to get healed. And the next verse says, and Jesus got up very early in the morning while it was still dark, went out to a secluded place and prayed. He didn't go to a building. He didn't take a book with him. He didn't take any trinkets. He got up early in the morning while it was still dark, went to a secluded place, got alone, and prayed. You think God was jealous for him in that moment? Was God going, oh, I wish he hadn't brought that? No. God's going, you are right where I want you to be. And I'm going to pour out my faithful love on you. This is the place of worship for him. Jesus in that moment demonstrated the worth of spending time with God and God alone, without any building, without any books, without any trinkets, without any guides, without anything but his wonder and the presence of God. And he just sat for a while. The text says, and Simon Peter and everybody started looking for him, and eventually they found him. Now, if he got up while it was still dark, and everybody had to wake up, and then everybody started looking around, and then eventually somebody found him, how long was he there? I want to take this verse out of the abstract real quick and put it into the practical. Do not make idols. Do not try and conceptualize God in any way, shape, or form. And that sounds really abstract to us because that's not what we do. So how do I worship? Just go sit with him. Just go sit in his presence. And appreciate this and this and this and this and this. Without trying to create some type of caricature of material thing out of all this. And then you wake up the next day and you do the same thing. And eventually you're not going to even want the idols. You just want to be in the presence of God and just sitting with him. I want us to play a song. This is a dear friend of ours. She sang at our wedding. It was a song she did not write. It was written by another man, but she just loves this song, and she gives an explanation of it. And I've known Jamie for about 30 years, and Ashley's known her for a little bit less than that. But and it's a weird application of the second command, but I think it's the opposite. It's the flip of this. So just enjoy this. Go ahead.
We have a CD called Faith in You, and we felt like God was wanting us to do this, and it's really a CD that's full of songs of lamenting, and it's really a CD that's for people going through really excruciating